studied with some wonderful people. You've studied with, Sogyal Rinpoche, who wrote the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and you've also studied with the Dalai Lama. So out of all these teachers and all of these lessons that you've learned along your own personal journey, what's been the most maybe simplest or profound insight or piece of wisdom that you've learned that's just really spoke to you?
Well, I think in the sense that we're talking about, Vicky, I think the most obvious thing is how important the mind is in our life, and it is really the central thing. It's I used the title in this recent book, it's the mind that changes everything.
Which we have.
But then to realise that there's two wonderful things about the mind. The first is that we can change it, because I think a lot of people get to a point in their life where they realise that things aren't as they ideally like them to be, and either because the way they're handling stress or the way their nature's developed, or they find themselves too grumpy or too compliant or something like that. It's really nice to know that you can change even what seem like to be fairly basic traits. And the second part of that is that you can actually train the mind. And this is kind of comes back to what we were talking about with children at school. I went through a whole lot of schooling and got very little, in fact it's hard to imagine much at all, in direct training about how to use your mind, let alone how it worked or anything like that. So I think whenever age you come to it, whether you're fortunate like as a child to be introduced to this, or as an elderly person, to realise that you can train your mind and it can have such a powerful impact on your life is really exciting. And then to realise that if you're going to train your mind, it's like learning anything else. You need to be fairly deliberate about it and see it as an ongoing process, and consider how you can both get good information, but then with your mind, if you don't put it into action, you don't actually do things, it's no good. So it's nice to read about meditation, like I did for many years, but then it's a whole lot more useful if you actually do a bit of practice as well. And then you do a bit of practice and you go back and you learn some more, and then you do a bit more practice. And it's just like learning anything else. But I think some people do have fanciful notions about meditation, and it's sort of like, you read a chapter out of a book and it'll be like that'll do, or you just
it's like reading self-help books.
I
know how to do it now, but I'm not doing it.
So it's like, that's a lot of the work that I'm involved in now, is how do we help people to go from having a good idea to actually putting it into practice.
I always like to say to my students that meditation, what you put into it is what you get out of it. So I always teach them to just start with the breath, which is a beautiful anchor of meditation, because I love that quote from Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who developed the mindfulness-based stress reduction. He had this wonderful quote about our breath, and just to paraphrase, he said that the breath is always coming in and out of our body, but it's not until we maybe get a cold or a flu and we can't breathe that we then bring our attention to it, and it becomes the most important thing that we're concerned about. And that's one of the things that I like to start with personally, is I like to teach my students about their breath and their breathing and why it's so important. And just by being aware of their breath and using that as a beginning practice as often as they can when they think of it, makes such a profound difference for them just by focusing on their breath. So when you develop that into using your mind into a different way in meditation, then just think of the wonderful benefits that people can get from that when they've just got so much from being aware of their breath. It's wonderful.
And I guess that's the thing, is that most people can find a way to start meditation that's quite accessible, and one of the things that I'm always delighted with is that most people find they get real benefits out of starting practice of meditation fairly quickly, and it's certainly a thing that you can go on for years and years and take into sort of deeper experiences as you go along, and deeper benefits, but the immediate benefits are usually very real, and people can see things happening quite quickly.
Now, I know that you're a big fan of visualization imagery, which I am as well, and you use quite a lot of them in this book with these 48 meditations. So what do you think is the most beneficial thing about imagery in meditation? Because I know that the brain works in images and pictures, and when we apply knowledge on how to use that to our advantage, it can be such a wonderful opportunity.
Well, if we think about the fact that the mind's got those two aspects, it's got the still mind and the active thinking mind, a lot of what people describe as meditation these days is to do with the active thinking mind. Whereas really the real essence of meditation is to go beyond the involvement you have with your active thinking mind into that deeper stillness. So imagery is very much to do with the active thinking mind, and it can be used as a way of training the mind. So a lot of athletes use imagery to improve their performance. People have to speak in public can use imagery to be more confident speakers. You can use it to change habits, all sorts of things. It's very useful in that day-to-day sense. But if we're talking about the real essence of meditation, then where imagery can be useful is like a stepping stone that takes you from your engagement in day-to-day life and the busyness of your active thinking mind into a deeper stillness. And in that sense, the sort of imagery that's really useful is what we call more archetypal imagery, where we're using archetypal symbols, which are symbols that sort of speak to us on a really deep level and usually have the same interpretation cross-culturally. So for sort of healing and for peace and tranquility, the major symbols that are sort of metaphors for that, if you like, are light and water. So using those sorts of using imagery based on those sorts of archetypal imagery can be very helpful as a entree into deeper meditation, whereas using more sort of day-to-day type images can be really helpful in training your mind in that sort of in the sense of training your active thinking mind.
I have quite a few clients who I work with who are currently going through cancer, or who have gone through cancer. And my mother actually passed away when I was 24 from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I think that's what brought me a lot to meditation and healing, because I came to it in my teens to escape, really. Visualization was a huge thing for me in my teens. Because
it's like having an inner refuge, and I think that's something that kids really need to understand, that these days they can have a lot going on outside, but if you have that sense of an inner refuge, like a peaceful, quiet, safe, secure place that's real, because not just, it might involve a fantasy to get there in a sense, but that they can know that that's a tangible thing. That's what gives them that sort of inner confidence. I think that although things might happen out there that are tough, there's a part of them in here that's going to be okay, and I think that gives them a lot of confidence in life.
I think you've just described why I was attracted to it as a teenager. My parents didn't teach me meditation. I actually read an article in the newspaper, and I was I struggled so much with body hate and striving to feel a part of something when circumstances made me feel the opposite. And it wasn't because of anybody else's responsibility, it was because of my own, but at that stage I didn't realise that I had the opportunity to be responsible. So my way of coping was to escape and use my mind to do that. So I came to meditation because of reading this article and understanding that I could actually use my mind to create a more preferred existence, or a world where I could feel safe, where I could feel confident, where I could learn to trust my own inner voice.
So can I ask, did that then give you the confidence to be sort of more outgoing? Because that's sort of, I think, what can happen is that once you realise there's a part of you that can retreat into a safe place, and that's there, it's almost like you've got a base you can work from, and then kids can be more adventurous. Because it's certainly not, meditation is not intended to help people to withdraw in the long term, but to find that inner stability, I think, is really important.
I think it did. I do think it did. But that was sort of on the cusp of when my eating disorder really became involved and sort of took over. But throughout that whole journey, which was about 15 years of struggling through the eating disorder, the whole journey, I kept meditation with me. And one thing you said just before about using that visualization with with children to give them that confidence and that hope. I think that meditation always with me gave me that hope or that knowing that I was going to get through, that I was creating in my mind where I wanted to be, and even though I didn't have the tools to process all of the issues that were going on behind my eating disorder, I still had that to help me be confident in myself and my abilities, that I would get through it, that I was getting through it, and then eventually I was able to get through it, and to be able to sit here and say I'm fully recovered, which is wonderful, you know, for the clients that I work with to know that someone's recovered, someone can do it. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's probably aligned with how many people who come into contact with you through your retreats and all of the work that you do with mind-body medicine, you've been able to over the years give them hope.
Sure.
You know?
No, I think it's very real, and I think you're right. I think that, you know, to have a positive model of somebody who's gone through a difficult thing, you know, for somebody who's just starting, you know, and trying to find a way through, it's really, you know, makes a huge difference to know that it's possible.
And that's what you've become. You've become a role model for people who are striving to go through their own journey with cancer and their own journey of healing, whether it's cancer related or not, to be able to have a little hope that they can get through in whichever way is more comfortable for them.
And I think that's one of the nice things in the work that I do. I can genuinely say, anybody I meet with cancer specifically, I know that it's possible for them to get well in whatever circumstances they are. I'm sure it can be difficult, and for some people it's very difficult, but it's possible. And I think that's really significant, because I get this, well, I know, I think quite often people in the medical system can get a bit overawed with the statistics, and so if the statistics say the chance of recovery is small, they sort of go with the statistics, right, with the bulk of them, rather than the minority. And, you know, like in any situation, there's always a possibility that something different will happen to what the norm is. And, you know, in health, I think this is really important, because the atmosphere that's created around somebody trying to get well needs to be that one of positive expectation.
Absolutely.
And if people are really strong, and the fact that there's no hope, it's very depressing and very restricting for people.
Yeah, I very much agree, because when my mother was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, there was a young doctor who was sitting opposite us delivering the diagnosis and the verdict, and I was only 18 at the time, and I didn't know how to handle what he was saying to my mother, and she was so hopeful when he said 5 to 10 years. Maybe 10, 15, you know, I'd like to see my grandchildren. She didn't have the experience of being a grandmother at that stage. And he sat there and he looked at her and he said, "No, I'm sorry." So, you know, that just took her hope away. And, you know, my mother lasted 6 years. She spent so much time from that point looking outside of herself, trying to fight it, beat it, all that kind of stuff. And she didn't spend any time being at peace with this journey, so that her body was more comfortable in helping her move through the healing. And I think that there is so much power in words, but there is so much influence in the words from the medical profession when it's being delivered to a person who is really relying on the people around them to give them hope. So I think it's wonderful that you are a pioneer of giving people hope in their own personal healing journeys, whether that is recovery or whether that is being at peace with their journey, whatever it may be and what it may bring.
Or even best, you know, I really like doing that work and helping people to recover, but really, to be blunt about it, helping people not to get sick.
Well, preventative medicine, I think that's what it's
about. And, you know, with the rate of cancer that's around these days, and it's a highly preventable illness. So, and it's the mind that controls all this stuff.
Exactly.
What we do.
All right, so thank you so much for sitting on the couch today, talking about this fantastic topic of meditation and the mind and what it can do. We're going to put some information underneath the video for you so that you can get in touch with the Ian Gawler Institute and have a look at the websites. And I think that you wanted to make mention of a particular CD.
Well, yeah, we just talked quite a bit about children, and there's not a lot available to give guidance to how to teach children to meditate. And so my wife, Ruth, and I, Ruth's a GP, We've made one specifically for children.
Wonderful.
People can get that off my website, which is iangawler.com, or they can download it too. But that's people like me to use downloads more and more these days.
They do, yes.
So
Put it on all
they're
the
just
iPods.
available on that website there. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we'll put those links underneath for you, everyone, so that you can go and click along and learn some more information. Thank you so much for being on the couch. Thank you for watching. We hope that we've given you some food for thought. Take care of yourself. Remember, you are the most important person in your life. So love yourself, take care of yourself, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.